Hello, good day. Um, Welcome to my channel. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. This day we are going to be looking at what has been, a source of concern to so many students, and I feel that this video is actually very important because of how so many students have really um, really expressed their worry and concern over you know the modus operandi of um, of research defense. So today we're going to be looking at defense, the intricacies of defense, what you are expected to do while you are doing your research defense. Okay, be it internal defense, proposal defense, external defense. you know One of the research one of the exercises that you actually embark upon in the process of your research work is what is known as defense. The defense can, like I said, either be proposal, internal, or external. If it is proposal, it means that you have not concluded the research yet. You have not even conducted the research. You are just putting up, a proposal for what is about to happen. Okay. Now, in a good research, there are sections. Every research, according to, of course, a standard research, must be compartmentalized into five chapters. Now we have chapter 1, which is introduction. We have chapter 2, which is literature review. We have chapter 3, which is research methodology. We have chapter 4, which is data presentation and analysis. Then we have chapter 5, which is summary, conclusion, and recommendations. Now, in the process of research, in the process of defense, you need to demonstrate to your examiner that you actually were the one that carried out the research exercise. And how do you get them convinced? Okay, it is by preparing yourself very well. The first thing you need to consider is you have to do a background study of your research. You need to own up, you need to own it. You need to own it, even if you were not the one that wrote it, because of course there are research assistants that actually help students to do their research. Even if you were helped to do your research, that one is not a crime. Okay, because even governors, political office holders actually have, speech writers, people who write their speech and then they read it out during, occasions. So you are not doing anything wrong by employing research assistants that can help you to write your research. But what is important is that at every point in time that you are going for the defense, you have to do a rigorous study to ensure that you own the research work. Okay, so these are some of the things you must necessarily do to demonstrate to your examiners that you were the one that actually wrote the research, or that you are going to own the research. What are those things? Okay. But apart from the background that we talked about, like you have to do a prior study of your research, you also need to appear very, very, very well. You cannot go to a research tattered, you cannot go to a defense tattered. Okay, you have to be corporately dressed if you can. You have to be responsibly dressed. if you can, because it's like you're coming to stand before students, you are coming to stand before lecturers, before, it is like an interview that you're going for. So if you're going for an interview to be considered for a job, for instance, you are not going to appear in a very tattered way, unkept and all of that. So you must, as a matter of fact, you know put into consideration your dressing, okay? Because of course your dressing actually attracts marks, okay? Your composure attracts marks. Your your diction, expression, as well as your articulateness also attracts marks. All of these things actually attract marks. Now, your writing, the write up is just 30%. Your presentation is 70%. So you must know that one. So what are the things, if you stand before your examiners, what are the things that you need to do? Number one, introduction of self and topic. So the first thing you have to do is introduction of self and topic. What does that mean? It means that once you stand in the hall, if it's a hall environment, you can just say, good morning, my lecturers, good morning, my colleagues, if there are other students in the hall. Then you just say, my name is so and so. The topic of my research is so and so. For example, I can, once I stand, I'll just say, good morning, my lecturers, or good day, my lecturers, good day, my colleagues. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. The topic of my research is the impact of IMF on the political economy of Nigeria. I'm looking at 2000 to 2023. That is an example. Now, having said that, you have done introduction of self and topic, and which is number one. Number two is in is background to the study. The background to the study here is to actually look at the historical antecedents of your research. You have to go to that defense having a full grasp of what the background of the study is all about. It is at this point that you need to demonstrate to the lecturers or to your examiners that, look, you actually have a full grasp of what you're doing or of what you did. Okay, so it is actually very important. If I were you, I will actually, have a summary of the background to the study. Write it out, practice, rehearse it from time to time, so that you know exactly how what to do. If you're able to do a very good background to the study, you don't need much. Okay, you don't need much to say on the other things. Okay, because that is where you need to really convince them that you were the owner, or you are the owner of the work. Okay, that's number one. Number two, statement of the problem. Statement of the problem, you need to look at the problem, the issues, that you are actually researching on. You don't go before your examiners not knowing what to say under the statement of the problem. It is actually very important. Okay, so then number three, you talk about research questions, objectives of the study, and research propositions or hypothesis, depending on the one you're using. So this number three, okay, you have to let them know that they are four, that the research questions are four, objectives of the study are four, then research proposition or hypothesis are four, and they are written in line with each other. Okay, after that, you go to significance of the study. Now, basically, there are always three significance. We have the academic significance, and you can just tell them very quickly that the academic significance is that the research will be useful to scholars, academicians, and students who want to do, who wants to carry out research on your subject matter. Okay, then we also have societal significance, which is also the same thing as empirical significance. What does that mean? That your research work will be useful to the entire society in general. That if the society looks at your findings, they'll be able to actually find solutions to societal problems. Then we also have policy significance, that the findings from your research will be useful for policy makers, who want to actually formulate policies along the lines of your thought. And so they can borrow leaf from what you have on your findings and recommendations. So that is for significance. Then we have scope of the study. Under the scope, you need to look at the periodization. You can say that, okay, my research is basically about the impact of IMF policies on Nigerian political economy. I'm looking at from 2000 to 2013. Now, you can talk about the reason for choosing the topic and the reason for looking at the period of 2000 to 2013. Okay, you have to look at the reasons for that. Then after that, the next thing you will go into is gaps in literature. Now, these gaps in literature is actually very, very important. The reason being that you are actually demonstrating to the panelists that really that is really the area in which your research work is different, in which you are actually bringing something new to the table. And you can say that, look, that several scholars works that you have looked at, have been looking at issues from the perspective of the economy in general. A lot of scholars have been very generic about their approach to the impact of political economy, of the impact of IMF on the economy of Nigeria. However, you are looking at it from the perspective of AMAC or of the FCT. So you are narrowing your own down to FCT and not Nigeria in general. And that is actually the point of divergence, the point at which your own is much more, or your own is actually different from theirs. Okay, so that is so while others have looked at it from their points, the only gap you have noticed is that they did not do it like this. For example, if my topic is the impact of IMF on the political economy of Nigeria with focus on the FCT. Now, I can say that all the scholars' work I have read, they have all been talking about the impact of IMF on the political economy of Nigeria generically, without drumming it down to the FCT, which is the gap noticed. This research work, therefore, is an analysis of not just the impact of IMF policies on the Nigerian political economy, but also the political economy of FCT. So, me narrowing it down to FCT is what makes mine actually unique. So the next thing is theoretical framework. Now, the theoretical framework here, it depends on the theory you are using. Of course, if you are using three theories, you can mention the first two. For example, you can say this work has used three theories. We have the system theory, we have the structural functional theory, but the theory that is adopted in this research work is the functionalist theory of international organization. And the functionalist theory is appropriate for this work because it best explains what ECOWAS, is doing in West Africa, or if it is the IMF and its impact on the political economy of the FCT. I can say, I'm using the elite theory, having synthesized three theories the group theory, the institutional theory, and the elite theory. The elite theory best suits my work because it analyzes the fact that all the policies and programs of IMF have really been of much interest to the elites rather than the masses. Okay, having said that, I'll now go to the research methodology, which is the next one. Research methodology, you know, for those who are doing proposal, this is where this is the end, this is the last thing you're going to say before you end your presentation. You understand? Of course, if it is proposal, if it is MSc, it is 10 minutes. If it is at any level, whether proposal, internal or external, for MSc, it is 10 minutes. For PhD, it is 15 minutes. Okay, so within the first 15 minutes or 10 minutes, you are expected to run round all of these things I talked about, including the research methodology. Under the research methodology, you can just simply say that the research made use of both primary and secondary methods of data collection. For the primary, the research utilized both interview and questionnaire. If you're using focus group discussion, you can do that. You can also add that. If you're also using observation, you can add that. Okay, that is under the primary. But under the secondary, you can simply say that the research used documentary sources such as textbooks, journals, and all of that. So for those doing proposal, you have finished here. Once you finished here, you have to stand and wait for them to ask you more questions. But for those who are doing internal and external, you have to continue. And the next thing you're going to talk about is look at findings. Okay? For findings, you look at two findings and two recommendations. Two findings and two recommendations. Just look at your abstract, get two findings from there, and get two recommendations. If you cannot get two, you can get, you can actually get one. There's no problem about that. If you cannot get it from the abstract, you go to your chapter 5. You will get two findings and two recommendations from there. What are possible questions they may likely throw at you? The first question, and I want you to pay attention to this. The first question they may ask you is, what is the significance of this research work? I've just told you that there are three significance. One, academic, which is that the research work could be useful to academicians, scholars, researchers who may want to do something on this research subject matter. The second significance is societal or empirical significance, which is that the research work could be useful to the society in general. Then number 3 is policy significance, which is that the research work could be useful to to policymakers. Okay. Another question likely that they might ask you is, what is the scope of your study? The scope of your study, I talked about it. Look at the topic of your work and then the period. The period is the date. That is, if it's from 2000 to 2015, you now give them the reason you are choosing the date. Another question they may ask you is, what is the gap you are trying to fill in this your research work? Or what new are you bringing to the table? Or how is this research work unique? Okay, now don't forget, there are 5 ways in which they ask these questions. This question. Number 1 is, what new are you bringing to the table? What motivated you to embark on this research work? What is the gap in literature? What have other scholars not done that you are doing? And how do you think this research work is relevant to the academic world? Okay, so all of these things are talking about the summary of gaps in literature. Another question they may ask you is, what is your theoretical framework and how relevant it is to your work? Okay, that is another question. So you look at your theoretical framework, particularly the number three, the third one that you used. You have to tell them about it. Then another question they may likely ask you is, what is your research design? Look at your 3.1. Go to chapter 3 and look at 3.1. That is where you have your research design. Then another question they may ask you is, what is the population of your study? You have to look at your 3.2. 3.2 is population, sample size, and sampling technique. So you have to look at your population. Is the figure that they are looking for, just the number. That is what they are looking for. And once you mention the number, you tell them it is drawn from all the institutions that you are using: Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Women Development, Ministry of Ministry of this, Ministry of that, all the institutions that you're using. Then another question they may ask you is, what type of questionnaire or interview are you using? You understand? There are basically two types of interview. We have the uh, key participant interview, that is KPI, and key informant interview, that's KII. You understand? So the one you chose, you have to let them know. Then questionnaire, they'll ask you, what kind of questionnaire are you using? Is it open-ended, closed-ended, Likert scale, or mixed? You have to also answer them. If it is Likert scale, it is 5 options of strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, strongly agree, and agree and strongly agree. Those are 5, 5 option um questionnaire. Now that one too is actually um, closed-ended. Then we also have open-ended. The open-ended is the one that the respondent will have to supply the answers to the questions. Okay, so if they now ask you, what are the specific secondary data that you use, you can tell them information from journals, textbooks, time series of CBN, time series of the institutions that you're using. Okay, time series are just information like bulletins of institutions that you are actually using for your research. Okay, so I think those are just the major things that they may likely ask you in during your defense. Okay, so now these things are actually very important. Pay attention to your dressing. Endeavor to do a prior preparation, and all of that before you go for the defense. Thank you.